If you like what you're listening to, support this podcast on Patreon. Patreon.com, search Phil Dawson, or find a link in the show notes and join up. It's very much appreciated. Thank you for listening. Okay, hello. Hey, folks. Phil here, the guy reading these. And I just want to update you with what is going on as we approach the end game of Book 1 and the final chapters. First and foremost, I wanted to say thank you. And I really mean it. I've been able to track how many people are listening and where the listeners are coming from. And we seriously have listeners from all over the world. And it's really cool, and I really appreciate it. And I was even reached out to today. It is July the 20th, 2021, when I'm recording this, and was told how much this person is enjoying the books. And that really makes me feel good. It's truly a pleasure to be able to get this story out to fans who want to hear it or check it out again. So I'm 100% grateful for you guys listening. It's really cool. It makes my day. Secondly, yes, I do plan on continuing reading the books, but I have some big transitions coming up in my life as my first child is due in September. So I'm not exactly sure how my schedule will play out or when I'll be ready to dive in and commit to another book. But don't worry, I will get to it eventually. I want to do it. And meanwhile, I'd like to ask a favor of you, my dear listeners, as I would like to ask for your support. And the best way to support me and this endeavor is to share it. Tell your friends who you play with, maybe your local game store buddies or any communities that you belong to with Magic. Have them take a listen. Share the link if you can on your socials. Anything you do can help, and it can help in so many ways we don't even know how, right? Maybe someone will make some cool art. Maybe we can make a Discord or something to create a community to discuss the lore and the story that we're all experiencing together. That would be really cool, and who knows what can come of it. But that is the easiest and most helpful thing you could do for me. And again, it would be greatly appreciated. I don't want to go and try to just pimp this thing everywhere I can and be like, oh, check it out. I'm doing this. Go click on it. Follow it. I'll do that some, but it means more coming from you guys. And also, I'd love to hear from you too. So feel free to email me or tweet at me or write to me, and we can do, mailbag type shows and really make this something bigger than just reading the books in due time. But we're starting just getting the books done. Next, for those of you who are listening to this as close to the release date of this, congratulations, because you are, for the first time in this entire book, going to go through it without any ad support. I've been given the opportunity to plug the hosting service, and that means over the next few weeks and likely with the next book, every show going back will start with a plug for Anchor and Spotify. And if things go well, I want to add even more and maybe even make a financially viable program, because that would be pretty cool. And speaking of financing, you can also choose to support the show through the link description. It's a donation subscription, much like Twitch or OnlyFans. I don't know how that works. But anything received through that will go directly to making this better. In the long run, I have an old laptop I'm working on. I got to get a new computer at some point. Short term, even more pressing of the issue, I got to get the next set of books. I have the next one, but I got to get the next set of books. So any financial backing would be awesome. And it can come up with ways to make that valuable too once we get to that point, if we get to that point. But again, it's not necessary or ever required by that matter. I just ask that you share it and feel free to engage with me, as I'd love to hear what you think. Lastly, I'm doing my best, guys. I know scheduling and waiting for episodes can create some resentment or dissent in the ranks. I know that, that consistency is what wins in this type of thing. But we're almost done, and it has been so much fun. I know the voices have been kind of all over the place, but we're getting through it together. And, it's, like I said, it's been fun, and I really appreciate it. And I have to say once again to my play group back in the U.S., Corey, Buckets, Mox Mike, Tom, Tim, Blake, James, Casey, Ripo, rest in peace, Bo. I miss you guys. I love you guys. I can't wait to see you guys. Let's finish this battle. Chapter 33, Tawnos and Ashnod. The last battle began before dawn, as the overcast sky was just beginning to lighten. The remaining mechanics on both sides began activating their destructive artifacts, and the thrumming of their engines was a bugle call to both sides. The vibrations grew on both sides as more wings were limbered, treads were checked, and leg armatures were put through their final preparations. With the first light of dawn, the Dragon engines surged forward, forming a wedge and bearing down on the Argivian position. Behind them lumbered two huge flanks of transmigrants, and the remaining Falaji soldiers decked in Ashnod's spiked armor. Bringing up the rear were Mishra's great ground-shattering engines and war machines, protecting the flanks of the wedge. Behind these lines rose a dozen winged dragon engines, bugling battle cries and breathing flames into the morning air. Urza had guessed his brother would try a direct assault, counting on the weakened state of the Argivian forces after their battle with the Argothians. For that reason, he positioned all Tawnos' mobile fortifications, the Triskelions, in the center, supported by war engines of the Lord Protector's own design. The rest of the units were broken into smaller groups of clay statues, Avengers, and Sentinels. Shape-shifting automatons made of primal clay worked over adjustable frames held the flanks. The sky was alive with ornithopters and ornibombers protected by tetravi and clockwork avians that swarmed upward toward the great flying dragon engines of the enemy. The armies crashed together with a scream of shattering metal. The dragon engines on the ground moved among the Triskelions, hammering them with flame and savage blows, but the great fortresses refused to fall. Urza's war machines were smashed beneath the treads of the dragon engines, slowing them while hordes of Avengers and clay statues clung to their flanks, seeking to break through their armor to the driving motors within and destroy them. The dragon engines screamed, and the transmigrants fell upon Urza's flanks. The remade troops were picking at the clay statues like carnivorous apes, but Urza's newer shape-shifting automatons were too much for the reanimated forms of men and elves. Old blood and new oil splattered on the combatants as they slammed into each other. In the air, the clockwork avians swooped and dived at the dragon engines, seeking the weaknesses in their armor that would allow them to penetrate and spread packets of explosives within. Occasionally, there was a metallic scream as an ornibomber or dragon engine lost structural integrity and could no longer remain aloft. The huge engines sprawled into the seething madness below, crushing both ally and enemy beneath their sprawling hulks. On the far right flank, Tawnos led a squad of Yotian soldiers, heavily armored, looking more like beetles than humanoid automatons, looking for a way to the rear echelon of Mishra's forces. He held aloft the sensory-damping wand that he had earlier offered Harbin, and none of the other combatants seemed to notice him or his patrol. There was motion ahead of him, and Tawnos barked a command. The soldiers formed a wedge behind the old scholar, raising blades made of tempered glass that could cut through steel. Tawnos snapped the attack command, and they lumbered forward, their servos and governing mechanisms clicking as they sought out their targets. It was a group of priests, Gixans by their robes, and the automated soldiers fell upon them like wolves among sheep. The blades of unshatterable glass rose and fell like scythes, and the Gixans screamed as they fell beneath their razor-sharp edges. There was a clatter of glass upon metal, and Tawnos at first assumed that the priests were wearing armor, but when he caught up with his weapons, he saw the Gixans had replaced parts of their own body with machinery, large, lumbering, clanking prosthetics that denied them the speed with which to escape. Tawnos looked down at the fallen bodies and wondered if the alterations were voluntary. It smelled of Ashnod's work, but she had never modified the living, only tormented them. Was this something new in Mishra's arsenal? That's when things started to go wrong. There was a whirring noise behind him, the familiar whine of one of his own Yotian soldiers approaching. Tawnos half turned, and in turning, realized that the automaton had its blade poised to strike. The Master Scholar stepped back and stumbled over one of the Gixen's bodies. The fall saved his life, for the soldier's blade cut through the air where Tawnos had been moments before. Another of the soldiers stepped up in front of Tawnos to defend him, and the two Yoshin automatons began cutting each other to ribbons. Tawnos rose slowly, the joints in his knees complaining. He looked around. All the Yoshin soldiers were fighting among themselves. Their blades of tempered glass cut into each other, peeling away their heavy armor like orange skins. Already some were falling from the assault. Whether they were attackers or defenders, Tawnos could not say. Tawnos shouted a command for the unit to form up, and the machines ignored him. He shouted the command for them to cease fighting, and they ignored that as well. Finally, he bellowed the order that would deactivate the units. They paid no attention to this order. The battered survivors of the contests only lurched forward to seek new targets. Tawnos took a step back, then a second. Then he was running for the center of the line. Two soldiers attempted to follow him, but soon fell to fighting each other. As Tawnos moved along the line, the story was the same. The machines on both sides had forgotten their basic orders and were lashing out at random, striking any target in their path. He found a unit of clay statues in combat with a band of usually allied Avengers, the great automatons pulling chunks of primal clay from their statues' frames. On the horizon, a pair of dragon engines had their necks entwined like mating geese, and each had its jaws wide open, attempting to bite the other's head off. The Triskelions had opened fire on Urza's battle engines and on each other, and already smoke was billowing from their frames. Overhead, the clockwork avians were attacking the ornithopters, and their needle-sharp beaks ripped apart the craft's reinforced wings. Tawnos stumbled across human bodies as well, mechanics, guards, other scholars, and Falaji warriors. The humans had been the first to be destroyed in the rebellion of the machines. Tawnos heard someone call his name, and there was a flash of scarlet against a black cloak. Ashnod shouted his name again, and Tawnos waited as the woman scrabbled over the fallen body of a clay statue. She was bearing her ubiquitous staff and still carried the battered backpack she had possessed the previous evening. "Is this your doing?" shouted Tawnos over the clashing din. 100 yards away, a headless dragon engine was using its neck as a metallic whip to breach one of the Triskelion towers. Ashnod shook her head emphatically and shouted back, "It's affecting Mishra's devices as well. Maybe something in the way the machines are getting their commands?" Now it was Tawnos' turn to disagree. "Nothing like this happened before. Maybe the two brothers' stones, the Might Stone, the Weak Stone, could their proximity do this?" Ashnod shouted, "You tell me! It seems as if everything with a power crystal has a mind of its own." There was an explosion nearby, too close. Both man and woman crouched as a fireball bloomed skyward, shaking the ground with its eruption. "One of Mishra's war machines!" yelled Ashnod. "I'm going to get back to Urza's camp!" shouted Tawnos. "Come along?" "Thought you'd never ask," replied Ashnod. The two headed away from the line as a great dragon engine, perhaps one of the originals Mishra had brought to Corlinda, rose over the hillock. It regarded the two beings before as if they were insects. "You have a command word to control that thing?" asked Tawnos. "You think it would listen?" replied Ashnod. The dragon engine hesitated, then turned away, moving back into the heart of the battle. "Something you did?" said Tawnos, but Ashnod only shook her head. Then a third voice spoke up. "No, that was me." It stepped into view, and Tawnos saw a creature of nightmares. It was as tall as Tawnos, with long coils that sprang from the back of its skull-like head and twitched of their own volition. Its body was constructed entirely of struts and cables, held together by sinews of flesh which twisted like muscles as it moved. It was the ultimate automaton. "Demon!" shouted Ashnod. The creature laughed, and it was harsh, clicking sound. "Is that what you call one who just saved you from your master's devices? Yes, I can control it, even if your masters can't. I control most of the creatures now, and when they are done slaying each other, I will take the strongest ones back with me to Phyrexia." Ashnod dropped the pack and hoisted her staff with both hands. "Get back!" The demon laughed again. "Now is the time to pack up the toys and go home. Urza and Mishra will die today, and with them fail their hopes and their legacy." He paused for a moment, then added, "and their students." The demon crouched to leap, but Ashnod was faster. She brought up the end of her skull-tipped wand, and multicolored energy surged from the tip. The creature staggered under the force of the blow, but did not fall. "You've grown more powerful," it snarled, but its words were force. "I've been practicing," said Ashnod. Tawnos noticed that her teeth were gritted as well. "Tawnos!" she shouted. "Take the backpack!" Tawnos did not move immediately, instead drawing his own weapon. "No!" shouted Ashnod. "This one is mine! Take the backpack! In it, there's a bull. Tell Urza to fill it with memories of the land. Got it? Memories of the land. Tawnos did not move, and Ashnod cursed. Urza's gonna need it if the thing is here. Already the demon had risen to its feet and was staggering forward, struggling against the beam of Ashnod's staff. As Tawnos watched, its arms grew longer and its fingers sharpened into talons. Sweat was streaming down Ashnod's face. Go, baby duck! She shouted and redoubled her effort. The demon staggered back a few paces, then resumed its slow progress forward. Tawnos grabbed the pack and turned, running for the base camp. Behind him, the demon screamed and Ashnod cursed. Then their voices were lost in the clanging din of the mechanized battlefield.